Hey, everybody. It's a very special Thursday afternoon edition of The Bullpen with Adam the Bull. It is Thursday, January the 5th, 2023. And on today's podcast, all I do is answer your questions. I've been asking you all day for your questions that you have for me. Sports or non-sports, as long as it's not about politics, I'll give you an answer. I have the questions. The answers are coming up next in The Bullpen with Adam the Bull.
Podcast is not for the faint of heart.
And I do think it's time for the Browns to move on.
It's not for those who ride the fence.
He's proven nothing.
But if you're looking for someone who tells it like it is about Cleveland sports,
everybody does fandom their way.
You've come to the right place.
I don't think he's any good.
It's time for The Bullpen with Adam the Bull.
It's The Bullpen with Adam the Bull on a Thursday, and today it's your chance to get your questions answered. I've gotten a bunch of questions today. Hopefully I'll have time to answer all of them. We shall see. Here we go. Let's get it started. So earlier today, I put out a tweet, and let's see. I got to find the first response to it. I want to go in order. Here we go. I didn't. Okay, here we go. So the question was that I asked specifically today. I tweeted this out about 8 hours ago. Doing something a little different on the podcast today. Send me your best questions about sports, local or national, or anything else. No politics, and I will answer as many as I can today. Send your questions here or via email between now and 3 p.m. All right, so let's get to it. This one is from, I have a bunch of responses on Twitter. I did get a couple of emails. We'll get to those as well. Let's start with Tron Madden. Tron Madden on Twitter. Is there any pro athlete you think you could beat in a fight? Is there any pro athlete I think I can beat in a fight? I mean, probably not. Probably not. I don't know. Probably not. If you're a pro athlete, you're between 20 and 40. I'm 51. I'm a big guy, but I'm, not in the best of shape. I wouldn't have much stamina. So no, I have to say no, unfortunately. I mean, maybe there's one or two people, but probably not. I got to keep it real. I'd probably get my ass beat by most professional athletes, if likely all. All right, next question. What big name? Oh, this is from Frank. On Twitter, Frank, what's his ad here? It's, it's hard to read his Twitter handle. Let's see. I don't know. TELLSLIKEITIZ. Frank says, what big name player position should the Gardos trade prospects for? Well, I'll tell you, it's a good question, and there's a few different guys that I think of, and I've obviously thought a lot about who the Guardians could trade for. We talked originally about Sean Murphy was a guy we talked about, and you'd hope the Guardians would trade for it. Didn't happen. Obviously, they were in the mix there, but in the end, it didn't happen. So, okay, we go to the drawing board, and I'll bring up a guy that I mentioned a few weeks ago, and it's gone quiet, and that's Pirates outfielder Bryan Reynolds. Bryan Reynolds is an all-star player. Now, he's not a huge name because he's played for the Pirates, but he's in his prime of his career. He's 27 years old. 28 years old because he's going to turn 28 in a couple of weeks. So this will be his age 28 season. He's been in the big leagues 4 years. In 2021, he was an all-star and finished 11th in the MVP. In 2019, he was Rookie of the Year. 2020, obviously, was the shortened season. He didn't have a good year in that shortened season. Last year, not a great season for him, but still better than average. OPS of 807 was down a little bit, but still over 800, still good. He had 27 homers in 145 games. That would be near the top of the Guardians list. Only 62 ribbies, but again, not in a particularly good team. He gets on base, career 361 on base percentage in about 2,000 plate appearances. He's got power. He could steal, give you some steals. He's not a big-time stolen base guy, but he'd probably be even better with the Guardians. He actually had a career-high 7 steals last year, and we know the Guardians like to steal, so he's not deficient in that vein. He is an adequate fielder, not a great defensive player, but an adequate defensive player, and he's just an overall very good player. He'd be under team control for, I believe, 3 more years, but I'm going to double-check that. Let's see. Earliest free agent 2026. So, yeah, 23, 24, 25. So he's going to make $6.75 million this coming season. And then he'd be eligible for arbitration in 24 and 25. They'd probably have to pay him, if everything goes well and he has a good year, maybe $10, $12 million in 24, and maybe a little more than that in 25 if everything goes perfect. So reasonable money, team control for 3 years, does everything well. He's not, he has really no weaknesses in his game. Adequate fielder, adequate on the bases, good power, excellent on base. And he's been, in 2021, he was a 6-WAR player. I mean, that's fantastic. So he's had 2 excellent seasons. Last year he was solid. His only subpar season was 2020 again, but that was a weird season with COVID, shortened season. So in the 3 full seasons he's played, 2 excellent and 1 solid, which is this past season. More than solid, good season. So, again, just turning 28, so you'd have him for ages 28, 29, and 30. He could play, obviously, all 3 outfield positions. He started 300 games in center, 134 in left, 31 in right. So there's position flexibility, at least in the outfield. And he would give you a really good middle of the lineup bat. I mean, that would be, if they were able to get Brian Reynolds, that would be a massive, massive addition for the Guardians. Will it happen? I don't know. Things have gone quiet. I haven't heard any rumors involving Brian Reynolds recently. And the Pirates do have an interesting young team with an up-and-coming lineup that I kind of like. So maybe they're going to not grant his wish because he did say he wanted to be traded. They may kind of just keep him there. But it's be interesting to see what happens. But I haven't heard any rumors about him recently. Okay, let's see where my time is here. Okay, let's get another question in before the first break. Next question. This is from my man Eddie Everhart, Brownstown 1217. Eddie is a coach's tier member of the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. We love Eddie. He says, which Cleveland athlete who experienced injuries would have been the best had they had a virtually injury-free career? Great question, Eddie. The first guy, and there's probably some others. There's definitely some others. I'll give you a couple of backup choices. Certainly, I think if Grady Sizemore would have had a better career. I think if Travis Hafner would have had a better and longer career. I'm probably forgetting, I'm probably forgetting some guys, but the first guy that came to my mind when I got this question from Eddie was Tim Couch. Obviously, it was not just the injuries. It was the fact that Tim was on such an awful disaster of a franchise. But with his body type, his skill set, Tim Couch should have been a better quarterback. In a better situation with better health, he probably would have been a more successful quarterback. We'll never know. But off the top of my head, Eddie, when I read the question, that was the first name that came to mind, was Tim Couch. Okay. Let's get a couple more in before the first break here. John Clee, at JohnnyBoy05, says, way too early World Series matchup prediction. Who you got? The playoffs, obviously, John, is a crapshoot. We know that. It's hard to predict. But, okay, it's early. I haven't really started thinking about my predictions yet. But I can get to it here. So let's think about this. In the American League, right now today on January 5th at 5:29 p.m., my favorites to win the division. Obviously, the Astros in the West. I would say the Yankees, and I can't stand that, but the addition of Rodon to the pitching staff and bringing back Judge is big. I would say the Yankees in the East, and I think the Guardians in the Central. I think it's going to be tougher this year. Although I think the Guardians will get off to a better start, but the White Sox got to be better this year. They're way too talented. It should be tough competition. But I am going to pick the Guardians, or at least as of today, unless something weird happens, unless things change in the next few months. I'm leaning towards picking the Guardians in the Central. Who are the most likely wild cards? Well, we now have 3 wild cards, right? So I would say the contenders would be the Mariners, the White Sox. I don't think the Angels have improved enough. I don't think the Rangers have improved enough. The Twins are going the wrong way. The Blue Jays are okay. I don't love the Blue. Who did the Blue Jays? I got to look at the Blue Jays depth chart for a minute. Did they add a good closer? I can't remember now. Let's see. Blue Jays. Who the hell's the Blue Jays closer? It's not coming to me. Jordan Romano, who was last year, and he pitched pretty well. I don't love their bullpen. They added Chris Bassett to the rotation. Barrios was so bad last year. I'm not as high on the Blue Jays. They'll be in the mix, though. Orioles were a fraud. They'll go backwards. I don't believe in the Red Sox. The Rays are always in the mix. I'll say your 3 wild card teams are the Rays, the White Sox, and I'll take the Mariners over the Blue Jays. Rays, White Sox, Mariners. I like that. Love that young Mariner lineup. They're pitching. They're an aggressive team. Okay, so that's the American League. National League, I know you asked me for the World Series, but I got to go through the process to get there. National League, I've got the Cubs winning. No, I don't. I wish I could, but I don't. I've got the Cardinals winning the Central. I've got the Padres winning the West. And I have the Mets winning the East. The wild card teams in the National League. I do think the Cubs are better, but not a wild card team. They're still, I think they scrap back over 500 this year, but not a wild card. Nobody else in the Central is any good. The Brewers, I think, are going backwards. So I don't think there's going to be a Central team in the wild card. In the East, obviously the Phillies went to the World Series. I think they caught lightning in a bottle late in the season. I don't love them. Braves are good. Nats stink. Marlins stink. You got the Dodgers in the West. D-backs are not good enough. Giants, I think I got I don't love the Phillies, but I think I got the Phillies, the Braves, and the Dodgers as the wild card teams. Okay. I can't pick the Yankees. It would hurt me too. Listen, the Astros are right. Man, the Mets are so good, though, right now. But their top 2 pitchers are really old. But to bet against Verlander and Scherzer in the playoffs, the best team doesn't always win. Mets haven't won a World Series since 1986. I got to say I'm leaning towards the Mets, though. I feel like I'm being it's too easy a pick. I'm going to go Mets over the Rays in the World Series, a roundabout way. I hope I'm wrong. I don't like the Mets. They're not my most hated. When I was a kid, the Mets were my most hated team. But now they're probably 4th. I hate the Yankees years ago moved into the number 1 spot, and the Cardinals. But in the last decade or so, the Red Sox have moved past the Mets too. I hate the Red Sox more than the Mets. The Mets are probably 4th on my disliked list. But anyway, that's there you go. All right, a lot more questions to go, and we're halfway through the podcast, so we got to keep it moving. Let's take a break. Have a little water. Okay. Before we get back to it, let me tell you that if you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories, you got to try a Built Bar. Built Bars are awesome. They're high in protein. They're low in calories, lots of great flavors, and real chocolate. And now you don't have to go. You can go to Built.com to get your Built Bars, but you can also now go to Walmart or Sam's Club. How about that? Two great places to get your great Built Bar. Built Bar. You got to try this. Okay. Let's get back to the fan questions. Again, I asked today on Twitter. I said today I'm going to spend this podcast just answering questions from the fans, and that's what I'm doing. So far, they've all been about sports. Well, one was sports-ish. Somebody asked me what professional athletes I could beat up. But we do have some non-sports questions coming as well. All right, Brownstown Andy Piccone, at Andy Piccone says, if you played in Major League Baseball, what would your walk-up song be? Well, I thought about this, and it would be like I have to decide between a bunch of Billy Joel songs. Like I'd either go with You May Be Right, It's Still Rock and Roll to Me, Pressure, or Miami 2017. I think I'd go with You May Be Right, because if you know Billy Joel, you know that album, the Glass Houses album, the beginning of that song, which is the first track on the album, the old school record, there's like crashing glass before the music gets going. I think I'd go with that song. So there you go. You may be right. I may be crazy, but it just may be a lunatic you're looking for. All right, this is a great question. I'm going to try to give you an honest answer, because that's what I do. Nate, at Strange Labor. Rate the quality of sports radio in Cleveland on a scale of 1 to 10, and shout out one host from a non-WKRK station. For those who don't know, and I'm sure most of you do know, but of course I spent from August 29th, 2011 to April 1st, 2022 as the host of the Bull and Fox Show, along with my buddy Dustin Fox. In fact, Dustin just texted me this afternoon, and I'm not going to say what he said, but it was just odd. He actually just texted me 5 minutes ago while I'm doing this podcast. But I keep that between him and me. But, Dustin will always be family to me, and, we miss each other, certainly working together. But on to other things, right? So, so the reason he says not WKRK is because WKRK is 92.3 The Fan, which is where I worked. So he wants me to shout out a non-WKRK host. The quality of sports radio in Cleveland on a scale of 1 to 10. Now, the question is, am I comparing it to other cities? I would say I really believe that the quality of sports radio in Cleveland is good. I do. I believe that. I'm going to say it's in my mind, I'm going back and forth between a 7 and an 8. I'll say a 7, which is good. I'll do a shout out to Dustin and Nick, who are learning the ropes together. It's a challenge, obviously, for Dustin. He's been working with me for so long. Now he's got to work with somebody new. Nick's doing a good job, the two of them together. Got to say, I think the morning show with Ken and Lima, those guys have really hit their stride. I hate to give Ken any credit because he's a pain in my patoots. I don't even know what a patoots is. But those guys are doing an excellent job. I'm not listening that much, to be honest. But I've heard those guys enough over the years to know that they're doing a nice job. And My man, Jonathan Peterlin. I've only listened to him a couple times, so I mean, obviously I've listened to him a lot in the past. But since he's been the full-time host of the night show, I've only been able to listen a couple of times because nights are a little tricky for me. But I try to listen whenever I can, and he is killing it so far. I'm so happy for him. I'm so proud of him. He's worked hard. He does a tremendous job. I hope you all give him a chance. As for one non-host to shout out, a non-WKRK host, that's an interesting one. So what I'll say is, first of all, I have not, when I was working at the Fan, I never really listened to other local sports radio stations. I honestly didn't listen to even our shows all that much because I didn't want what other people said to seep into my head and affect my opinion on anything subconsciously. And so I kind of avoided local sports talk for the most part. I would put it on here and there, especially our guys. But overall, I did not listen certainly to other hosts on the other stations. However, I do know some of the other guys on some of the other stations, and I'll give my shout out to Emmett Golden. Emmett was on. It's so funny because when Dustin and I first went on the air, between the time we went on the air and the time I left the show on April 1st, they WKNR 850, they changed their lineup a zillion times. And by the time we were done, like we were competing, they had 4 different shows up against us. That's how absurd it was that Dustin and I, and Dustin still is doing a 5-hour show. 5-hour shows in radio are ridiculous. There's no excuse to have it. It's really a poor job by any radio station doing a 5-hour show. It's way too long. And ESPN Cleveland they had Browns Daily from 1 to 3, and then Emmett Sherrod from 3 to 5. I don't know their other shows from 5, but I know they had a show from 5 to 6 and a show from 6 to 7. But I do know Aaron Goldhammer a little bit. He and I have been at we used to go to do the Les Levine breakfast together a couple of times. And I got to know Emmett and Gerard a little bit. I obviously don't know those guys very well, but a lot of times when we would be broadcasting from Berea at Browns camp, Emmett and Gerard would be there as well. I think I got to know Emmett a little more than Gerard, but I don't really know either of them that well. Both seem like very nice guys. But the little I've heard, and I don't say that to insult anybody. I'm not, these shows, whatever. The little I've heard, though, Emmett, I like where he comes from. So I'll give him the shout out of the non-92.3 hosts. All right, I answered that question as honestly as I could. Did I not talk about a few people? Maybe. But, not going to mention everybody, right? I don't want to kill anybody. All right, next question. I think we got to move it along here a little bit. I'm taking forever on these questions. Clee Bert 32 Clee. Best Italian on the West Side. To be honest, I don't think there's a lot of good Italian food on the West Side. If there is, all the places I've tried on the West Side have not been very good. There's some good pizza. Sweet Basil in Westlake. Il Rione, which is in Ohio City. And Forno is the one I've recently come across out in Avon. All 3 really good pizza places. In terms of my favorite just Italian restaurant, I really don't have one. There's not a single Italian restaurant on the West Side. I haven't been to every place probably, but there's not a single Italian restaurant on the West Side that I would say I love. You know what? There's a place in Lakewood I like, and I can't think of the name of it. I got to try to look it up real quick. Let me see if I can remember, because I've been there a couple of times, and it was pretty good. Darn it. It's going to drive me crazy. All right, I'll have to look for it. Let me look for like 30 more seconds, see if I can figure it out, because it's not coming to me off the top of my head. But if I think of it, I'll mention it. Okay, next question. What do we got next? Bull, what do you think is the best course of action that the NFL should take to resolve the Bills-Bengals game? Selfishly, I'd like them to play the game at some point, but I just don't think it makes a lot of sense. I think the best course of action is probably to cancel the game. My man, Joey Waller. Joey was a colleague of mine at the Fan in New York. Asks a question that if you're from Cleveland, you won't even get, but I'll answer it anyway because I told Joey I'd answer it. Better Sheepshead Bay. Sheepshead Bay is the neighborhood I grew up in Brooklyn. Better Sheepshead Bay roast beef, roll and roaster, or Brennan and Carr? I'll hang up and listen. Of course, Joey grew up in Joey does play-by-play and as an update guy in New York and great guy. Recently had a child. Congratulations to Joey and his wife. But these Roland Roaster and Brennan and Carr, if you happen to be from Brooklyn, those are two pretty famous like roast beef restaurants in Brooklyn. So Joey, I would say I've always been a Roland Roaster guy. It was closer to my house than Brennan and Carr, so we would go to Roland Roaster. Both great. Haven't been to either in decades, but I would say Roland Roaster there. One final break, and I'll try to get in the rest of your questions before we wrap things up next in the bullpen with Adam the Bull. Man, I didn't think answering these. I wasn't sure. At first, I was like, well, I got a bunch of questions, but I wasn't sure if I had enough. Do I have too many? But man, I'm taking a long time to answer these questions. Okay. Let's get back to it. We got to try to go rapid fire here. These are people that responded to some discussions on the show. Fondest Browns. Dion tweets, I will be bowling the Ohio State bowling tournament at Yorktown Lanes in Cleveland on February 25th, 26th. My team name is UCSS fans. Beautiful. Love it. Okay. William O'Malley, fondest Browns memory. Myles Garrett bashing Mason Rudolph with a helmet, or Turkey Joe Jones spiking Terry Bradshaw. Such wonderful choices. The Turkey Joe Jones one, I was a little kid, so I don't really remember that one. I mean, I know about it, but I don't remember it. Myles Garrett going after the Great Kazoo was a good one. Let's see. Tom tweets, what player will the Guardians add to bolster the lineup and add some power hitting this offseason? Well, they have added power hitting with Josh Bell and Mike Zunino. I mentioned Brian Reynolds earlier. Even if they don't go in that direction, there's still, there's Trey Mancini still out there. I don't know that they'd go in that direction. I don't know if they feel like I still think they need another first base DH type. I still think Trey Mancini could be a good fit. I don't know if they're going to want to allocate any more free agent money that way, but I think I would go that direction. KB tweets, will Bitonio be a Hall of Famer? I'd say probably. If I had to bet, I'd say yes, but I don't think it's a slam dunk. Let's see. Massive. None of the bra. Totally disagree. All right. Let's get to my email questions, and then we'll say goodbye. Where's my email? There we go. Okay, Brian Sheely on email says, do we overreact to the Browns? The reality is that this is the most stable the Browns franchise has been in my whole life. Barry Stefanski and the whole front office seem to be aligned on their approach. They have been a relevant franchise these past few years and are finishing as most expected this year with hopes of contention next year. Why do most have to treat this year as such a failure and overreact? There's always some overreaction. I don't think it's an overreaction, though, in general. Yes, they might finish 8-9 like a lot of us picked, but as I said a couple of weeks ago, if I had known that Jacoby Brissett was going to play as well as he did, I would have picked him to have a better record. The Browns did disappoint. There's no doubt. The defense was a huge bust this year. And I don't want to hear about injuries. The Browns are not even close to being the most injured team. I don't think people overreact. I do think they're pretty stable right now. I do think they should not fire Kevin Stefanski. I do think that's a good thing, but Kevin Stefanski will be on the hot seat next year, no doubt. Second question, will Francona have a future outside of managing with the Guardians? With his time limited and new ownership involved and potentially taking over at some point, is there a risk in losing what they had? Could Francona stick around in some capacity to help? Sure, I think this is I don't know Terry Francona personally. I've interviewed him a couple times in person. I certainly don't have any inside scoop on this, but I can't imagine he's going to go manage somewhere else. I think he's going to keep managing the Guardians until he feels like he can't do it. We've talked with Zach Meisel about this, Jason Lloyd about this, Mandy Bell. You know, he's got health issues, but as long as he wants to manage, he's not getting fired. He's a great manager. There's no way he's ever getting fired. Could he stick around in some capacity if he retires? Sure, I guess that's possible. If he wants to, I don't think anybody's kicking him out the door. Finally, Mike Larson emails, what do you think of the Guardians offseason additions thus far? Are they done? How do you feel about a player like Jurickson Profar coming in as a super utility player? I mentioned, you could use a utility guy. Mancini's more of a first base DH guy. Profar's, I don't love them. I think they're done. Unfortunately, I think they're done with key acquisitions. I hope I'm wrong. I hope to make a blockbuster move for Brian Reynolds. You know, big upgrade over Owen Miller to Josh Bell. Slight upgrade. Offensively, a good good power upgrade at catcher. I'd like to see them make one more big move and then a couple of small things. Overall, I'd give the offseason a B+. And those are your questions. I'll do this again. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks for joining me on this Thursday Bullpen. I'll talk to you tomorrow right here with Adam the Bull. See ya.